All right, y'all. So apparently, Annette Chambers had a press conference today. Annette Chambers Smith, the director for the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. The media is asking questions, but of course, the media is not made up of any correctional officers that I know of. Therefore, I'm going to give my commentary, point out the lies, call bullshit where it needs to be called, and I'm going to be very honest with everybody. I cannot wait to depose this woman. I cannot wait. That being said, let's go.
Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's media availability. This session will be recorded. We have about 30 minutes set aside for today and limited time for questions. So please be considerate of others' time and try to only ask one question. Everyone in the session will be muted unless you're called upon to ask your question. If there are remaining questions when we conclude and you feel your question hasn't already been answered, please feel free to reach out to us directly. Um, we will begin in just 1 minute. A little bit of the logistics. I will first turn it over to Director Chambers Smith, who will provide remarks, and then we will open it up for questions. Please notify me in the chat if you have a question, and I will call on you in the order that I receive the questions. And with that said, Director, I will turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. Um, Coming here today to talk to you about a horrible tragedy that happened at the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections on Christmas Day. Andy Lansing, a longtime correction officer of Ross Correctional Institution, was brutally murdered by a person under supervision of DRC. I
Can you not say convict or inmate? Even her political correctness is coming out. Her woke agenda is coming out just in the first goddamn statement comes out of her mouth on this. It's a tragedy, but let's politicize it. It's a tragedy that this brave man lost his life, but let's go ahead and keep with our woke bullshit.
cannot tell you how horrible the impact of this has been on his family and on the department and all the people who work here. This is the ultimate sacrifice the staff member can give is their life. And Officer Lansing was pure and good and solid. He trained new staff. He was professional. He always had a ready smile. There's no one that I've talked to that has a negative word to say about him. And he was always engaging. He was a father, he was a husband, and all he was trying to do was his job, and he did it very well. The Ross Correctional Institution is it's a high security prison. It's a difficult work. I would say that the work done in high security prisons in this department, in any institution really, is far more dangerous than what their law enforcement peers do on the street.
And even more so thanks to you.
We are working in places and having experiences that average people do not have. I know that the only thing anyone wants to do at the end of their workday is go home alive and safe back to their family. And unfortunately, Andy Lansing did not get to do that on Christmas Day. Inmate Cannon, who did this, is just pure evil. I want to thank all of the people from the prisons that have been going to Ross Correctional Institution to help them in their time of need. We appreciate during these times that everyone can come together as a team and help. I'd like to answer any questions you have to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Director. Your first question is from Carla Robner at WBNS.
So my question is, the threat that was made that the union reported, was it directly towards Andy Lansing, and how was it made?
So Andy Lansing did write a conduct report, which is a notice of bad behavior on inmate Cannon in April. And it had, I think, 3 charges on it: disrespect, threats, and disobedience of direct order. He was found guilty of 2 of those, not all of them. And at this point, I don't have any more details than that, but I can tell you we are pulling together the entire history of Cannon's conduct reports for this incarceration and making them available to those who may request, and they should be available as early as, I'm hoping, Monday.
All right, let me stop right there. I requested conduct reports on threats that were made against me by inmates. Conduct reports that I wrote, by the way, at Toledo CI. I've seen less black ink on CIA documents from the Phoenix Project than I've seen on some of those. You're not going to get the full story on it. You're going to read it in pieces. So, yeah. Good luck with that. Second, disrespect, verbal threats, disobeying a verbal order. Those individually may not sound like a big deal to those who have never worked in corrections, but I assure you all 3 of those are very big deals. The disrespect and the making threats, they go hand in hand. Hey, CO, I'm going to fuck you up. Well, that's obviously disrespect, and that's obviously a threat. Hey, CO, I'm going to spray shit on you. I'm going to stab you. I'm going to have my people show up at your people's houses. I'm going to have my people kill your family. These are all threats that I have at some point in my career received from inmates. And these are common occurrences. Take those seriously. Write them up. Don't take this shit. And the disobeying a verbal order. I don't care what the verbal order is. If it's something as benign as put your shirt in your pants, because that's how you're supposed to be dressed before you walk out of your cell or walk out of the housing unit, or something as important as, inmate, don't go past this line right here. A verbal order is a verbal order, and every verbal order is just as important as the last. There are reasons you give an inmate a verbal order. These are things that you don't just gloss over. And the 3 of those charges pretty well go hand in hand, unfortunately. I've actually seen people say, oh, well, it doesn't seem like that big a deal. Yes, it is.
Thank you, Director. Your next question is from Lisa Rantala.
Rontala. Yes, Rontala. Thank you from WSYX. Thank you for the time, Director Chambers Smith. I do have a question. We did receive reports from the Ross County Sheriff's Office from the responding officers who went to the yard on Christmas Day. They had indicated that Corrections Officer Lansing was guarding or was in the guard shack by himself. Can you please explain what the guard shack is, and should it be manned solo? And if not, why was it manned solo Christmas Day?
So, first of all, on Christmas Day, each position in that prison that was assigned to a correction officer had a correction officer in it. Andy Lansing elected to work voluntary overtime so that other people could have Christmas off. That's what he was doing there. He was in the shack, as you said, and that is a small structure in the middle of the yard, really. It's not a regular building, and it's not connected to or inside of anything. So we're literally talking about a place for shelter and to make log notes and store your lunch. It's not a building, so to speak. It's a comfort space to get out of the weather and to document and store your things. So it's a small structure and it's in the middle of the yard. So that, I hope that answers your question.
Okay. In Florida, and I'm using a lot of what I'm going to say is out of Florida. That's where I did most of my time in corrections. In Florida, we had center gate officers. Center gate controls movement throughout the yard, from one area of the yard to the other. Housing unit, lower compound, upper compound. I'm going to use Century CI as an example on this because that's the best example I can think of right now. That had a permanent officer during movement hours at center gate, and the officer that was there was actually a very capable officer. I've heard he's retired now. Cannot remember his name. That dude was awesome. Anyway, his job is to make sure that inmates are not going into unauthorized areas. That is the whole purpose of having somebody at that shack. And by the way, I resent the term guard. We don't guard a damn thing. We're correctional officers. Um, that being said, if there was a problem at that gate, specifically the one I'm talking about, and I don't know anything about Ross Correctional Institution. I've not stepped foot on this compound. I know that I was in the academy with people who worked at Ross CI, but I don't know anything about the compound itself. I've never been there, so this could be a total different setup from what I'm talking about. But I know the center gate at Century CI um, has a tower right next to it with a CO up there with an AR-15 sitting 60 feet in the air. If there's a problem at center gate, there's an officer in the tower. They can get on the radio and say, hey, we need some help. 1024, 1024, 1024, or the Ohio equivalent, signal 3. There's also yard officers on the yard to respond. Where were the yard officers? That's what I want to know. If there was yard movement, there had to be yard officers. There's going to be more than one CO out during a mass movement. And that's what I want to know. Was this a mass movement or was he just out of place? These are things that I would like to know. May never know. I probably won't. I'm going to request these records, but we'll see what happens. But I'm just throwing that out there to you. Where were the other COs? And she said, and I want to address something else. She said every post that required a CO was filled. Does that mean that you had enough staff to staff all level 1 posts and that's it? Did you not have any level 2 officers? Level 2 officers meaning officers that were in posts that were they need them, but they're not essential. You know, level two posted officers are great rovers. They're great for people wandering around, and if there is a problem, usually one of them is going to be the ones that respond or relieve somebody whose job it is to respond. That's what I want to know.
Thank you, Director. Your
A
next,
follow-up, should that be locked?
It's not a control center. It's a place where an officer could go in out of the rain, could eat their lunch, could document in their log. It's not a locked structure that's supposed to be locked.
thank you, Director. Your next question is from Anna Hoffman with NBC4.
Hey, Director, thank you so much for taking the time today. We've been told about staffing shortages at the Ross facility, also at facilities statewide. You also just mentioned the conduct report written by Officer Lansing directly about Cannon. So did the staffing shortages have anything to do about why they were there? Were there any reason for the two to be separated following this conduct report? Are they normally not together?
That's a lot. Try to unwrap it. So normally there would be movement going to the chow hall at this time of day. So for example, Cannon's unit was released to go to the dining hall, which is why he was
So it
on
was a
the yard.
mass movement.
He veered away from going to the dining hall and instead went to where Officer Lansing was working and attacked him brutally.
So it was premeditated.
There are staff shortages at the department. Statewide, we have an 8% vacancy rate.
Bullshit.
At this prison, it's a little over 11%.
Bullshit.
For about at least a year and a half that I'm aware of, Ross Correctional Institution had no vacancies. And then when we created extra positions for death row and a couple of security prison positions that the warden requested, as well as opening up a housing unit that had previously been closed, that created a 40-person shortage. At this point, there are
40-person shortage. Y'all keep that number in mind.
19 people who have start dates for that prison between now and January 20.
19. Okay, you got 40 open positions, and you got 19 rookies coming out of the academy after 8 weeks of training of no CO left behind at Orient. You can't make this shit up.
21st. I just don't think the prison became fully staffed again after the additions that I just talked to you about. But Ross Correctional Institution has traditionally been a prison that's fully staffed and actually had a few extra officers on.
Bullshit.
A follow-up to that, could this attack have been in retaliation to that conduct report in April?
The Highway Patrol is conducting an investigation, and I think we'll get that type of information from their investigation. So they're not finished with it at this point.
Have they started it? Because the only reason that I got the Ohio State Highway Patrol to actually investigate my assault was I had to push for it. I had to contact them. No, I'm sure they're investigating this because of all the media coverage. And they should investigate this. They absolutely should. You damn well better. You have a murder on a correctional officer. I hope they're investigating their asses off. And I hope they leave no stone unturned, no I undotted, and no T uncrossed.
Thank you, Director. Your next question is from Monica Sager with Newsweek.
Hi, Director. Thank you very much. I was wondering if you could share more about statistics within the facility on how often attacks like this have happened in the past, if anything in the future is going to be taken to make more supervisions, things of that sort.
I don't have all of their statistics memorized, but
Oh,
as I said,
bullshit.
it's a level 3 prison. So certainly there haven't been any other murders of staff, but there have been assaults and there has been other activities inside that prison that you would kind of see at that security level. It's a very dangerous work that's being done there. I'm sorry you asked another part of the question. I don't remember what it
No,
was.
no worries. That second part was, will there be any additional precautions then taken in the future to amplify the security or anything of that sort to prevent things like this in the future?
Well, of course, anything that we find that can be done to make things better will be done. That's no doubt about that.
Bullshit.
But at this point, I think what we want to make sure is that everyone who's there is trained and they have all the tools that they need, and that we look at whatever the findings of the highway patrol are and the subsequent administrative investigation and address them all fully.
Thank
Okay. Okay. First off, every CO in the state of Ohio is on high alert right now. Because let me tell you what's going to happen. Right now it's open season. A CO just got killed. If every CO statewide in the state of Ohio and surrounding states, because of the media coverage that this has gotten, is not asserting dominance right now, we have a problem. That's number one. So I'm certain that right now, if you look at a convict side, or if a convict looks at you sideways, they're probably catching they're catching a write up at the minimum. Um, I'm not saying beat the shit out of somebody for looking at you sideways. I'm not a fan of that. Um, but as far as her answer, her politician's answer of, well, we're looking at everything and we're going to see what we can do. We all know what to do. What you can do, Miss Chambers Smith, is get your ass out of your swivel chair, walk down to the compound, walk the compound with your legs, by the way, and talk to COs and see what's really going on. That's what you can do. Talk to those who work the job and how can I make your job safer? I have so many recommendations for you, but you won't listen to them. Your social justice experiment, being the director of a fairly large Department of Corrections, has failed.
you, Director. Your next question is from Stephanie at Channel 6.
Hi, Director. Thank you for your time today. I want to ask you a question regarding the Civil Service Union sending a letter to the governor, Governor DeWine, yesterday, requesting that yourself and the warden be put on administrative leave while this investigation into Officer Lansing's death continues. Do you have a comment to that?
I understand anger. I understand the need to make sure that this never happens again for anyone who works here. That is, I understand the union's position.
And I do have a follow-up to that. The union is also claiming that he feels, as the director, there is currently not a handle on staffing, better pay, and drug use and violence. And he's saying if those three things were better handled, that it could have prevented Officer Lansing's death. Do you have a comment to that?
Well, I do think there's a handle on staffing and
Oh
pay.
shit!
We did a mid-contract pay increase, which is unheard of. And then we also just recently had contract negotiations with another increase. So pay has been addressed a couple of times. I do believe that staffing is a problem nationally, but here in Ohio, we've had an ever decreasing vacancy rate since COVID. As I said, we're at 8% right now, and many of our facilities are fully staffed, and a couple of them have more staff than is on their organizational chart. So while we keep working on staffing, we're getting better and better, and we track it weekly. So this idea that there's just no staffing in the prisons it's not true of every site.
Can I have one more? Did you have you been in contact with Governor DeWine? And if so, what does that conversation look like?
Of course, everything going on, we do brief the governor so that he knows what is happening. I think you asked another question about drugs, and quite frankly, they're a scourge. We have very robust contraband interdiction strategies, from drone detection to no longer accepting mail to coding legal mail and different searches, body scanners, drug sniffing dogs. Like, all of this has been put in place during this administration. So we take this very seriously, and quite frankly, this department has one of the most extensive drone detection systems in the country. And we also deployed flop cameras, and it's an entire plan around contraband interdiction. But 60 to 70% of the people that are incarcerated here are addicts. They try to get drugs, we stop them. That's what we try to do. And that's not going to change. It's been that way the whole time I've been in corrections, since 1993 and before. But we do everything we can every day to stop it.
Thank you,
Where's the body scanner? Because the only thing that was at Toledo CI was a metal detector. They didn't do PETs. Now, they did have, at one time that I was there, they actually did a staff shakedown. Personally, I think a staff shakedown should happen every day. Just my opinion. And I will say this, that 90% of contraband, and I'm going to say 80 to 90%, is coming in through staff. 80 to 90% of contraband coming into a correctional facility. Inmates are not going out, going on the street and getting it and bringing it in. Maybe some that work outside work squads, I could see that. But 80 to 90% of all contraband, cell phones, drugs. And speaking of contraband cell phones, Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections is the only fucking department I have ever seen to allow staff to bring their personal cell phones on the compound. Because that's a great idea. When I saw that and I heard that, I was literally appalled. I can give so many. I'm not going to get that. That's for a whole different topic. Um, understand these kids can't live without their phone shoved up their ass 24 hours a day to look at the tick and talk and the Snapchat and the Facebook and whatever. But in Florida, we had cell phones. The only cell phones that were allowed on the compound was issued by the state to certain staff members. The only run-of-the-mill COs that were allowed to have those phones, really, if you weren't a white shirt, was RRT members or CERT members or CIT, CNT. And they were state issued. When you went to the search room, you had to show me, number one, that you were authorized to have that phone, and number two, that it was issued by the Florida Department of Corrections. And some of y'all are like, well, cell phones are not that big of an idea. Bullshit. Yes, they are. That's a big deal. Um, as far as the body scanners, where? Where? Because you ain't got them at Toledo CI. Are there drugs in prison? Yes. Will you stop 100% of the drugs in prison? I honestly believe you can. You got to put the work into it, but I honestly believe 100% that you can stop drugs from coming into the prison. Wholeheartedly believe that. Um, and as far as the union, I'm surprised because I honestly think OCSEA is a joke. I think OCSCA, which is the union for the state of Ohio, I think they're the biggest joke I have ever seen in my life. She talks about money. Well, I don't care if you're getting paid $100,000 an hour. Do you want to get killed for your efforts? If you don't live to the end of your shift to spend that money, what good is that money? Yeah, you need to step down. You don't need to be administratively suspended. You need to be fired and criminally charged, in my opinion, with this man's murder. At least held civilly responsible, if not criminally.
Director Sarah Donaldson with Ohio Public Media has been waiting patiently.
You. Hi, Director. Good afternoon. Two questions, but they're gonna merge because I appreciate that we're not doing follow-ups. First question is, can you say at this point in time, I understand that it was a brutal assault. I understand that's how ODRC is describing it. Was Officer Lansing stabbed? Was he beaten? How was he killed specifically? And my second question is, what were the staffing levels on Christmas Day compared to a normal day that's not a holiday?
Damn good
So,
questions.
it was my understanding there were not weapons used. I don't have further information than that. The coroner's report is not out yet, nor the investigation from the Highway Patrol, but it is my understanding no weapons were used. Regarding staffing, every post that was supposed to be filled that day was filled. How it compares to their normal schedule, I don't have that level of detail here, but
Why
I can
not?
tell you that I've been in contact with the warden regarding this matter, and he did let me know that, yes, their staff, they started on their shift with all the staff present that they're supposed to have, and that's because, I think it was like 8 people volunteered to work overtime, so they didn't have people mandatorily working overtime there on Christmas Day. They volunteered to work overtime.
Thank you, Director.
That is a bullshit answer. Again, oh yeah, we had a fully staffed shift, but we had people working overtime. Let me tell y'all how the state of Ohio can fix their overtime problem and their staffing issues. Go to a Panama schedule. I've said this from the start. Ohio is the only place I ever worked 8.5s. I know Florida went to 8.5s after I left statewide. But on 12s, if you know you're there for a 12 and you have to work a 16, you're not going to be as fatigued because you're not working 5 overtime shifts or 3 overtime shifts back to back to back. The only time on a Panama schedule that you will even work 3 days in a row on your normally scheduled days is every other weekend. And you have every other weekend off, which is a 3-day weekend. Um, During the weekdays, you work 2 days, you're off 2 days, you work 3, you're off 2, you work 2, you're off 3. That's a Panama schedule. That gives officers more time with their family, less time at the prison, more time to decompress. But I guess that's too hard for the state of Ohio to understand. And honestly, on that, I blame the union. Because I know the state itself wanted to go to 12s, and the union said no. 12s work, 8.5s, unless you have the staff, 8.5s don't work. 8.5s will turn into 16s and 17s real quick.
Director, I believe every media outlet in the chat has had an opportunity to ask a question. I don't see any new outlets indicating that they have a question. So with that, if you do have a question, a follow-up question, feel free to reach out to me directly. This is Joellen Smith, and my email, along with Jen Truxell's email, is in the chat. Director, do you have anything to say in closing, and then we will wrap up?
I want to say that my heart goes out to the Lansing family. They're in my prayers.
When'd you get one of those?
That's it.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Those crocodile tears are about to drive me nuts. I doubt she gives one single solitary droplet of shit about this officer that gave his life for her bullshit. Just my opinion. I don't know this for a fact. I'm saying this is just my opinion. She's more in damage control, the way it looks to me, and I could be wrong, but she looks like to me she's more in damage control because she's afraid of losing her fucking job. And you know what? She should lose her job. The warden, everybody on shift who didn't respond. And here's the question nobody asked. The information I got was that the inmate attacked the officer, left, went back and attacked the officer a second time before it was stopped. Where the fuck was his backup? Where the fuck was the goddamn yard officers? Where the fuck was everybody else? Let me tell you how I feel about corrections. If you and me is getting our ass whipped, we better both be getting our ass whipped. Because if I'm taking an ass whipping and you're not taking that ass whipping with me, we gonna have a problem when I get done. That's the way it ought to be. If one of us is getting our ass whipped, we all better be getting our ass whipped. And there's a reason for it. If it's 30 on you and I'm around, it'll be 30 on 2. If it's 30 on 2, maybe I can give you a little bit to where you can break free and we can both get free, stand back, disengage, regroup, and then go handle the situation with a few other COs to get this situation under control. That's how this works. That's called teamwork. Nobody asks that question, but then again, they're not COs. They don't think like that. I think like that because that's how I run shit. I've got no problem going toe to toe with a. I've done it. I've gone toe to toe with 158 head of convict. I didn't back down. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I got more balls and sense. Did that right there at fucking Rayburn Correctional Complex in Angie, Louisiana. 158 head of pissed off convicts under the direct supervision model. Look that up. You'll find out what that means. Louisiana kind of likes to do that. I love direct supervision, by the way. I think it's the best way to stop shit. I didn't back down. Would I have gotten hurt? Probably. But I ain't backing down. If you don't have that kind of balls, you don't belong in corrections. Just my 2 cents worth. Y'all have a good day.